at slope. And we've been working with slope since the beginning. We've been working with slope since we started linear functions. Slope only occurs with linear functions. So on your notes, you want to write something like y equals blank x plus blank. We have been working with this since Wednesday, when you all first learned how to do the charts and things like that. Slope is always the number next to the x. And the reason we're doing this is because eventually we're going to be graphing linear equations, so you have to know where slope is and why slope is important. And in math, we use the variable m to represent slope. I don't know why, but mathematicians a while ago decided m was going to represent slope. So if I'm ever like, what's m? I'm actually talking about slope. And then this, wait, can you stop? This is what we call the Y-intercept, and we're going to talk about that on Monday. Today we're just focusing on slope. And you all have heard about slope for a while. Raise your hand if you've ever gone down a hill or skied or dirt bike, something like that. Okay, so when you're doing something like that, you're going down a hill. And we talk about hills or mountains based on how steep they are. Everybody with me? So in math, the higher the slope, the steeper the mountain. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're just looking at slope. So we're just talking about the steepness of our linear functions. How fast the linear function is going up or how fast the linear function is going down. Yes, sir.
Is the higher number, the higher is the steeper slope, the higher number?
The higher it is, the more steep it is. So like if it's a 10 slope, that's really steep. If it's 2, it's just barely creeping up. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's 4 different kinds of slopes that you can see. If a line slants upward, you read a line just like you read a book, from left to right, just like you read a book. So this line, if it's slanting upward, is what we call to have positive slope. You always read a line from left to right. If it's sloping downward, we say it has negative slope. And if you'd rather write the words, you can do that. And then this is where you need to be careful. If a line is vertical, so going straight up and down, that doesn't have a slope because we can't really read the slope of that line. So we call this an undefined slope. We're saying there's not really a slope to it. It's literally a straight drop off. But if it's going side to side, it's not going anywhere, that's 0, or what we would call flat. Slope is always written as a fraction, so to have 0 slope, 0 would be in the numerator with a number on the denominator. You're going to need to know that. If 0's in the numerator, it has 0 slope. If 0's in the denominator, it has undefined slope. So knowing the placement of that 0 is important. If 0 is on the top, you know automatically it's 0 slope. If 0's on the bottom, it's undefined. Everybody good with the 4 types of slope? Check. Okay. Now we're going to learn how to find slope. One thing you're going to have memorized is this formula right here. If you want to highlight it, circle it, I don't care, but you're going to have that memorized. But the more you use it, the easier it is. If you can highlight it, color it, just know you have to know that slope formula. So slope is the change of your y's over your change of your x's. How much the graph is changing each time. Okay, so we're going to continue to use that formula over and over and over again. All right, so let's look at table first. There's 3 ways they're going to ask you to find slope. Using a table, using a graph, and then just using if they give you points. So on a table, which we all know how to make tables, now we're going to look at pre-made tables. You're going to pick 2 points from the table, just 2. Don't pick any more. And you can pick any 2 you want on the table. It doesn't matter. You're always going to pick 2. Then you're going to, substitute them into the slope formula. If substitute doesn't make sense to you, you can put replace, you can put into the formula, whatever makes sense to you. Whatever points you pick, you're going to sub into the formula. So choose the word that makes sense to you. And then you always want to simplify. But You always want to simplify it to its lowest fraction. Don't change an improper fraction to a mixed number. Don't change a fraction to a decimal. You want to leave it as a fraction, but get that fraction as low as it can go. That's just with slope. You want to leave it as a fraction. Everybody good? Okay, let's go do these 3 steps on the back. We're going to start with table. Okay, so first, you need to pick 2 points. It does not matter. If Sam wants to pick these 2, Catherine wants to pick these 2, and I want to pick these 2, it doesn't matter. You're still going to get the same answer. I always just pick the ones that are positives, because I don't want to deal with negatives, so I always pick the positives, and typically I just pick the first 2. And I typically will always pick the one with 0, because it makes it easier. You can pick any 2 you want, but for now, pick the same as me. I'm just going to pick this one and this one. So the first step is pick your 2 points. So I'm picking 0, 3, and 2, 11. Now remember, you can pick any of them you want. So if you're like, oh, those 2 stink, pick a different one. All right. Now what I always do too, and some of you will be able to get past this point, I have to keep myself organized. I label them, that's X, that's Y, that's X, and that's Y. Because you're dealing with 2 sets of X's and 2 sets of Y. And then I even go even further and say, okay, this is X1, Y1, X2, Y2, just so I don't get them confused. I'm just saying, this is my first point, so this is X1, Y1, this is X2, Y2. I'm just labeling them so I don't get confused. Everybody good so far? Yeah. Okay, step 2, you're going to substitute it into the slope formula. And the slope formula is Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. I'm not going to lie, the more you write the formula, the more it's going to become easier. All right, Leah Hale, what is Y2? 11. So instead of Y2, I'm going to put in 11. Perfect. Will, what is Y1? Y1. 3. So it's Y2 minus Y1. So 11 minus 3. Uma, what is X2? 2. Perfect. And Callie, what is X1? 0. So minus 0. Anybody confused at how I plugged that in? Okay, so 11 minus 3 is 8. 2 minus 0 is 2. That's all. Step 2 is just actually using the formula. Anyone confused? All right, so now our third step. Yes. We're going to. Step 3 is simplify.
Why did you just say 11?
Because Y2 is 11. You good? Yeah. Okay, so step 3 is to simplify. So my slope, or M, as we call it in math, is 4 over 1, or just 4, however you like to look at it. Both are correct. Any questions on those 3 steps? I put 4 over 1. I like to keep it as fractions, because when you go to graph it, it helps. Yes?
What's the 4 exactly?
It tells us how fast that line's moving up. So it's going up 4 every single time. That's the steepness of the line.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yes. Or in our chart, it's telling us X's are going up by 4s. Does that make sense? Or Y's are going up by 4s. All right. Let's now look at the graph steps. The graph steps, they go up by 8, but it's going up by 1.
Yeah.
So if you look, if that's a good question. So this is 4 over 1. So this is Y's, this is X's. So every time X goes up 1, our Y's go up 4. So 3 plus 4 is what? 7. So every time it goes up 1, now we're at 2. This would be 11. So this is telling us how much the Y's go up compared to the X's. Make sense?
Yeah.
Everybody good? Okay. Let's go back and look at graph steps. All right. Graph. Graph is the same thing. You're going to pick 2 points from the graph that fall on the line. Middle schoolers seem to struggle with this. You can't just pick a random point. It has to actually be on the line. I know it's shocking, but you can't pick a point that doesn't fall on the line. All right, then you're going to sub it in to the slope formula. Then you're going to simplify. Those steps don't change.
Does it still have to do with like the fractions?
Yep. Everybody good? You always go back to, if they ever ask for slope, you keep using the same formula. All right, let's look at the graph. I'm going to let you all pick any 2 points you want off that graph. Pick any 2 you want and write them down on your paper. It doesn't matter, we'll all still get the same answer. Pick any 2 you want. Don't pick the same as me. Oh, it's more fun if you don't pick the ones I pick. Okay, yours can be different, which is fine. Check with your partner, though, to make sure they actually picked points on the line and they actually wrote them correctly. It doesn't matter if you pick the same ones, just make sure they're right. All right, 5, 4. Okay, so I'm going to label mine. I would recommend doing the same for you. X1, Y1, X2, Y2. It doesn't matter, but I would label them so I don't forget which one's which, because it can get quite confusing. All right, step 2, plug it into the formula. Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. You all solve your own for a couple seconds. You all seem to do pretty well with the points, but let's go right down the steps just in case. So flip to the front, just so when you do it on your own. When they give you the points, you don't have to pick 2 points. It's actually nice. So all you have to do is sub them into the formula and simplify. When they give you the points, it makes it a whole lot easier. You're going to sub them in, and then you're going to simplify. All right, so on your answer on the back, you should have done 10 minus 7, negative 2 minus 4. You got 3 over negative 6. That is not in simplest form. Your answer should have been negative a half or negative 1 over 2 or 1 over negative 2, something along those lines.